Fingerprints are a key piece of evidence that can be used in a crime to solve a case. Fingerprints can be something that can be found at a crime scene, and it basically says that the person was there at that time. That doesn't necessarily mean that they were there or participated at the time of the crime. It just means that they could be there in that location at some point. Fingerprints really do not deteriorate. Koalas is one of the few mammals other than primates that have fingerprints. In fact, koala fingerprints are remarkably similar to human fingerprints. Even with an electron microscope, it can be quite difficult to distinguish between the two. Fingerprints and animals. Not only humans have fingerprints, but primates, like the chimpanzee that you see in the picture, they have fingerprints as well. And some primates also have fingerprints on their tail. Fingerprint is considered a trace evidence. It is a print or scan of friction ridges of the skin of any finger that is served as a unique identification marker. They're not only found on the fingertips, but you also have them on the palms, also on your feet. Fingerprints are made up of grooves and friction ridges. In the picture in the middle, you can see a very close magnification of fingerprints. The grooves obviously are the narrow valleys, and the ridges are going to be the hills that make up the pattern and give traction. Fingerprints are individual and are not shared by any two people. They can remain unchanged throughout the life. Damage may occur, but the skin repairs itself over time and the print will reappear. On this slide, we call this the anatomy of a fingerprint. When we're looking closely at the anatomy, we can see that there are crossovers, and this is where two friction hills meet into one another and then split. If you look at the picture that is shown, you can see that you have two that are coming from the top and they are splitting, coming together, pinching together, and then separating again. It almost makes it look like they're creating an X-like pattern. The core is going to be the center of the pattern, and not every single type of print actually does have a core. A core is going to be more in the loops. And we will get to those types of prints later. A bifurcation is something that is very significant. You will see a lot of bifurcations when it comes to looking at the prints. Crossovers are not as common as bifurcations. Bifurcations, you can have a lot of them in one single print, whereas with the crossover, you may only have one or two, and maybe sometimes none. The bifurcation almost looks like a Y or a tuning fork. It's a point where you have two friction ridges that are separated and then they come together to make one friction ridge. So think of it as a bifurcation. It's going to have one going to two, or kind of looking like a Y. A friction or a ridge ending is a friction hill stop. And this is going to be at a place. Sorry, that was my cat. This is going to be a place where you see a friction hill moving along, and then all of a sudden it just stops. So you can have them all over the place, and they're very, very important when it comes to creating a match, and also just showing where they are similar, where you have those ridge endings. An island is going to be a very small isolated friction hill. You can see that right above the delta underneath the ridge ending. Deltas are pretty significant too. There's something that's going to pop out pretty significantly when you have a loop or a different type that's going to be an arch. There's not always going to be a whole lot of deltas. Deltas, there may be two, maybe three, depending on if it's an accidental loop or not. The delta is going to have three arms, basically. It looks like it's like going in three different directions. At the very bottom, you can see there's some writing about the eye or an enclosure. And this type of print, I do not have an actual eye to show you on this one, but basically it's going to look like where it's basically looking like a cat's eye or two bifurcations coming together. It's where you have one friction hill, it splits into two, and then it comes back together.